Hey everyone, Cody here from MTG Knights, and today I'm going to be talking about my Eldrazi deck that I just completed about a week ago. Now this deck is actually based on a deck that I found online. I think it was Strictly Better MTG that I found the deck, like the template for the deck. So I'm going to link to them in the description area below so you can see the original video and kind of get an idea of where I got this idea for this deck. Now it is a colorless Eldrazi deck. There are no colored lands, there are no colored creatures at all, strictly colorless. And it's actually a really fun deck. It's about as fun as I thought. And I did make a couple modifications to the deck that, from the template that I found, and I'll kind of go into what those modifications were and why I made them. So what I'll do first is I'll go through the deck real quick, just briefly. Again, you can see the video and the deck list on his video. So you can kind of go through that whole thing. So I'm just going to go through it real briefly and then talk about the changes I made, what I like about it, what I don't like, and some of the strengths of the deck. So we'll start with land. Let's go here. Okay, so first we've got a Cryptic Caves, simply a land that you can tap for a colorless mana. I've got one of those. Next, I've got one Eldrazi Temple. This is an amazing card for Eldrazi decks. You can tap one to add a generic mana or tap it to add two for an Eldrazi spell or ability. Next, and I only have one of those if I didn't say that. Next, I've got 4 Seagate Wreckages. Seagate Wreckage is an amazing land. You tap it to get a colorless mana, but you can also pay 3 and tap to draw a card. But you can only activate if you have no cards in hand. A phenomenal card. If you've used all the cards in your hand, simply pay 3 and you get to draw a card. Great, I love that card. Next, let's go into Majoring Network. I have 3 of those. Majoring Network. Majoring Network, you can tap to add a generic mana. You can also pay 1 and then tap it to add a counter to it, and then you can tap it later to remove however many counters are on that. You get that many generic mana. So it's great for ramping if you have nothing else to do. You just have excess mana that you have not spent. Perfect for ramping this up to get mana later on for some of these higher cost cards that we'll get into. So I have 3 of those. Next is Rogue's Passage. So Rogue's Passage is a land that you tap to add a generic mana to your mana pool. It also has the effect that you can pay for and tap it to so that target creature cannot be blocked this turn. This is great for some of the higher cost creatures again, because you put this on them, you attack, they cannot be blocked. So it's going to do a lot of damage. So we've got 3 of those. Next, we're going to move into Mirror Pool. So Mirror Pool, it's pretty good. It's actually a mythic rare, I guess. And I think it's just because the effects of the card are really strong, and that's why it's a mythic. But Mirror Pool enters tapped. You can tap it to add a colorless mana. You can pay 3 and tap it and sacrifice to copy a target instant or sorcery spell you control, and then you may choose new targets for that. That's amazing because it's almost like a Reverberate, but doing it with a land. So I think that that's pretty cool, especially when we get to there's only 2 instants in this deck, and either one of them would be great to copy. The other effect is that you can pay 5 and you can tap and sacrifice it, and you can put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of a target you control. So again, if I didn't show it to you, this is Mirable, and that's really phenomenal. Again, if you can't play anything else, then it is a great card to play, if you have nothing else, because you can put out a high cost creature that's pretty strong and then make a copy of it. So really good. And I have 2 of those. Hey man, can you turn that down a little? Thank you. All right. Next, we move on to Spawning Bed. This is Spawning Bed. You tap it to add 1 generic mana. You can also pay 6 and tap and sacrifice this card, and then you get 3 1/1 Colorless Eldrazi Scion creature tokens. And then you can sacrifice them to get a generic mana to your mana pool. That's okay. I've never used this ability because I'm generally using that mana for other things. So if I'm going to pay 6 mana just to tap and sacrifice this, and I understand that there's cards out there that the cost comes down if you use Eldrazi tokens to pay for the cost, so it's probably good for that. In this deck, it doesn't do a whole lot, but this was based on the template, and I don't see a reason to take it out yet, so I keep it in. But I did go down to 2, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Next, we've got Sanctum of Ugin. I don't really know. Sanctum of Ugin. I'm just gonna say Ugin. Sanctum of Ugin. You can tap it. You get a generic mana, but you can also, if you cast a colorless spell with converted mana cost of 7 or greater, you can sacrifice this, and if you do, you get to search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shake. Hey, go, silly, go away. Sorry, silly dog. All right, so you basically get to put a high cost creature card into your hand if you sacrifice this, which can be good. Again, I haven't really used that. And I have 3 of those. Solely. Hey, go. Dog trying to ruin my video. Okay, next we have Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. You can add 1 generic mana to your mana pool, or you can tap it and add 2 to your mana pool, but you can only spend this on colorless spells and if you have 7 or more lands. Now, that's pretty good. I would say I don't usually get to use that a whole lot because I'll tend to get this and then I'll get like 6 land and then some of the other cards we'll see. But I have used it like once or twice, so it is pretty good, especially if you're going late game and you have that many lands. It does come in handy. All right, so we've got 4 of those. Lastly is the Ruins of Oran Reef. The Ruins of Oran Reef, it comes in tapped, which I don't like. You can tap it and you can add a colorless mana to your mana pool. You can also tap it instead to put a +1 counter on a target creature. You can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on a target colorless creature that entered the battlefield this turn. That's amazing because I mean it's a counter. It's not like it's just till end of turn. So you can actually buff up your creatures almost for free. But again, it comes in tap, so you get that trade-off. So it's great, maybe early game or on the turns where you can't use it anyway. It's really good. I think the template called for more of these. I think it was 3 or 4 of them. I have it written down. I cut it down to 2 only because I tend to need that mana right when I get it. So I actually cut it down to 2, so I still have them, but not as prevalent. So that is it for the land. I believe it was 25 total. It's 1 less than whatever the template is. Again, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So next, let's move on to, we'll move into instants. I would say instants and sorceries, but this deck only has instants and artifacts, and there's only 3 of them. So first is Titan's Presence. So Titan's Presence is an instant, costs 3 to play, and as an additional cost, you must reveal a colorless creature card from your hand in order to play it. And what it does is it exiles target creature if the power of that creature is equal to or less than the power of the card that you revealed. So if you reveal, a card whose power was 7, it had to be 7 or less of the creature that you're exiling, which is great because if you have that high cost creature in your hand, generally your opponent won't have something that high. So it tends to work out almost all the time. And there are 3 of those. Next, we get into Spatial Contortion, which is a really interesting card. I actually like it a lot. So Spatial Contortion costs 2 to play, 1 generic, 1 colorless. It's an instant, and basically target creature gets +3, -3 until end of turn. This card has actually saved me quite a few times, because the fact that it gets +3, -3, it's such a great thing, because you can either put it on your high cost creatures and buff up their attack when you're attacking, or you put that -3 on a low creature that your opponent controls and it kills them. So either way, it actually works out really well. I have actually just fallen in love with this card because it just works so well. It works really well for high cost creatures to do a lot of damage, but it also works on low cost creatures to kill them off. So I actually really like this card, Spatial Contortion, and it's funny because it's only an uncommon. It's not even a rare. But yeah, I have 4 of those because it's a great card. Lastly is the Hedron Archive, and it's funny because I had one of these cards for a long time, never used it for any of the decks, didn't see a reason to. Now it's in this deck and it makes a lot of sense. Now, it's a pretty decent card. Hedron Archive costs 4 to play, it's an artifact. You get to tap it, you add 2 generic mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 2, tap and sacrifice this, and draw 2 cards. It's a really good card, especially those turns where I can't play a creature, but I can put that out. It's going to give me 2 more mana. So generally what I like to do is, if I can get the 4 mana down, play that, and then I can tap it right away, because it doesn't come tapped, and it's not a creature, so I can tap that for the mana, and then play something else like Spatial Contortion. So 4 of those, and so far they've worked out pretty well. Because if nothing else, if I have nothing else in my hand or can't do anything, I can sack it, pay 2 and sack it, get 2 cards. So it works out pretty well. All right, let's get into, lastly, creatures. I'm going to start with, I'm going to go from low mana cost to high mana cost. First is the Endless one. So his mana cost is X. You basically just pay X for it to be as many counters as you want on this creature. So you pay X, and Endless one enters with that many counters on it. So it's a great card because it comes in handy early game, late game, doesn't really matter. Sometimes it's a great defender, sometimes you get early damage. I wouldn't say it's the best card, but it's a great all-around card, and that's why I only have 1 of them. It is actually in the sideboard of Strictly MTG's video. He talks about it in the sideboard, but I actually like having just 1 of them in the deck. Just kind of, it just tends to come in handy. So like if I have all high cost creatures and then that, I can play it, turn 1, 2, 3, whatever I gotta do just to survive till late game. All right, next we've got the Endbringer. This is a really cool card. The mana cost is really high on that one, but I'll do it anyway because I already brought it up. So Endbringer it costs 6 to play, and it's a 5/5. So what's cool about the Endbringer is that he untaps, you get to untap him during each other player's untap step. So he essentially almost has vigilance, right? Because you can attack and then you get to untap him when they're untapping. But the caveat is that he also has some effects. So you can tap him and he deals 1 damage to target creature or player. That's decent. Or you can pay 1 colorless and tap it. Target creature can't attack or block this turn. That's great for your opponent. So you put down the Endless one, and then when he untaps, you just do his tap ability again. They can't attack that turn, or something can't block, whatever it is. Or you can pay 2 and tap it and draw a card. So he's a great card because he has so many good effects on him. He just costs 6 to play, so that's not bad. You can get 6 mana probably by turn 4 in a good game. But it can take a while to get that mana, so that's why he's really good. But I only have 1 of him because he's situational, or sometimes he's really good, but sometimes I just can't get him out. So, all right, let's move into the next one. We've got Hedron Crawler. Hedron Crawler is a 0/1 artifact creature, and basically he costs 2 to play, but you get to tap him and you get a colorless mana. That's pretty much it. That's really all he's good for. He has a 0 power, so he's not good for attacking. Unless you did that land and put the counter on him, then I guess it could be useful that way. But anyway, you tap him and you get a colorless mana, so he's really just 4 mana ramp, so 4 of those. Next, let's move on to the Eldrazi Mimic. So the Eldrazi Mimic costs 2 to play, he's a 2/1, and what's cool about him is that whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, he can get the power and toughness of that creature. So if you put him down and you put, say, put down one of these other cards that's like a 5/8, he gets that until end of turn. So that's really awesome because early game you've got a 2/1 for 2 costs, which is not bad for a card. But later on, if you get some stronger stuff out and he's still alive, he gets to be that. And even if that creature can't attack that turn, if he's already been out, he gets to take on that power and toughness. So pretty decent card, actually. I have 4 of those, so 4 Eldrazi Mimics. Next, we move into Matter Reshaper. This is a pretty cool card. So Matter Reshaper costs 3 to play. He's a 3/2, so basically his effect is that when he dies, you get to reveal the top card of your library, and if the converted mana cost is 3 or less, then you get to put that card on the battlefield. And if it's not, then you just get it in your hand. So either way, you just reveal a card, you either get it in your hand or it goes on the field. The cool thing about that is that the converted mana cost of land is 0. So you can put that land on the battlefield. Now, you don't get to use that mana that turn. However, to get 2 land on the field in the same turn is almost always a good thing. So it can be good just for that alone, or you can get a cheap creature out like another Eldrazi Mimic or the little artifact construct dude. Either way, it's a great card. So you almost want him to die so you can get something else, or even another Matter Reshaper. All right, next we move into 3 of those if I didn't already say. Next we move into Reality Smasher. I love this card. It costs 5 to play. It has trample and haste, and whenever it becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, counter that spell unless its controller discards a card. That's awesome. So if they try to kill it, if they play, Lightning Bolt, or if they play, some kind of death card like Fatal Push or something. Well, not Fatal Push, but you know what I'm saying. If they play a card on it that was going to kill it, they have to also discard a card in order to actually let that go through. So just a great card. The fact that he has Trample and Haste alone is pretty good, especially if you can put him out and then get like the Eldrazi Mimic up to 5 as well. You're doing 10 damage with those 2 cards. So it's pretty good. And he has Trample, so it's like, even if they block, usually they're going to take some damage. So that's pretty cool. And that was Reality Smasher, 3 of those. Next, we move into the Oblivion Sower. I've got 2 of them, 2 different versions. One came in the dual decks for Battle for Zendikar. One I just bought at the game store. But anyway, Oblivion Sower, he costs 6. He comes in, he's a 5/8. And basically when you cast him, the target opponent has to exile the top 4 cards of their library. And if any of those cards are land, you actually get them under your control. Now, I read up about this card, and the interesting thing is that even if they had land in exile that wasn't due to Oblivion Sower, if they have land in exile, you can take those land. So it says that you may take any number of land cards that player owns from exile and put onto the battlefield under your control. So even if it wasn't due to him, if they were just in exile, you get to take them. Now, the cards in this deck don't really exile. There's a couple, but mostly it's, you're exiling just from this effect. But still, I've used it and taken, a couple of land. That can help. So it's a pretty cool card. I like it. And just the defense alone, being a 5/8, 8 is a pretty good toughness to have on a creature. So pretty good. Oblivion Sower, I have 2 of those. Next we move into the Conduit of Ruin. So Conduit of Ruin costs 6 to play, he's a 5/5, but when you cast him, you get to search your library for a colorless creature card, and the converted mana cost has to be 7 or greater, and you have to reveal it, and then you shuffle your library and then put that card on top. So that is going to be the next card you draw, unless something happens. But that will be the next card you draw, that converted mana cost of 7 or greater. So usually you want to put something like one of these last few cards on the top of the deck. What's great about this is that he also has the effect that the first creature spell that you cast per turn is 2 less. So because of that, when you play, say you were playing, the Bane of Balaged, which is one of the 7 cost cards, if you were playing that, you're really paying 5 if it's your first creature spell of the turn. Conduit of Ruin, I really like this card a lot because, you get to search for a card and then put that on your library. So 1, you know what your next card is. 2, it's going to be a high cost creature, which if you can pay for Conduit of Ruin, you can pay for the next card as long as Conduit of Ruin is still on the field, because it's going to get you that 2 off. So the only downside to it is that if you don't have enough mana, you draw that card and then you can't play it because Conduit of Ruin is dead for whatever reason. That's the only downside to it. But really, if you're paying 6 for him and then you put a land down that next turn, then you're going to have 7 for that 7 or greater, which this deck actually only stops at converted mana cost of 7, so you really don't have to worry about it. 2 of those, so 2 Conduit of Ruin. Next we move into the Deceiver of Form. So Deceiver of Form, it costs 7 to play. It's an 8/8, and at the beginning of your combat, you basically reveal the top card of your library, okay? And if it's a creature card, then the other creatures you control can become copies of that card. So say you had even the Hedron Crawler, that 0/1 guy. If you play this, when you go into battle, if you had Reality Smasher as the next card on top, the one with Trample and Haste, those little guys, those Hedron Crawlers, can become copies of that till end of turn. So those little guys can become 5/5s with Trample and Haste. Or if it became another Deceiver of Form, then you would basically just, do the 8/8 because you were already in combat, so you wouldn't do the effect again, I don't believe. But anyway, you'd get another 8/8. So it's really good because if you reveal it and it's not a creature and it's a land, then you know what your next card is. But if it is a creature, all of your other creatures can become that creature. So it's just really good. I really like Deceiver of Form because you can make small creatures, big creatures very quickly. So I have 2 of those. And then lastly, we get into the last creature, the last 2. It's the same one, but I have 2 of this. So it's the Bane of Balaged. It's the one that I mentioned earlier. So Bane of Balaged costs 7 to play. He's a 7/5. And he almost has Annihilator too, but it's better. So whenever Bane of Balaged attacks, defending player exiles 2 permanents he or she controls. Now what's cool about that is that not only are they exiling permanents, which usually tends to be better for you than if they just go in the graveyard. Because a lot of people have return from the graveyard cards, but if it's getting exiled, not as many people have cards to return things from exile. So 1, it's better because they're not going to the graveyard. 2, if you play Bane of Balaged and then say you play Oblivion Sword after that, if those 2 permanents that they sacked for exile were land, you're gonna get those land from them from Oblivion Sword. So it's a really good synergy between those 2. They're good cards on their own, but the fact that they can kind of work together on that just makes them better overall. So that is the deck. Overall, a very strong deck and very fun. I just enjoy that deck because if you can kind of get to the later game, it just punishes. So let's talk about some of the changes that I've made to the deck based on the template that Strictly Better made for this deck, and I'll just kind of go over that. So the first thing is that I have 3 Matter Reshapers. So I have 3 of these, and he has 4 in his template. The reason that I run 1 less is just because my local game store didn't have 4. So I really like to support the local game store if possible. You know, we have one a few miles away, so I really love supporting them, keeping them in business. So I bought almost, I would say 90% of this deck from them. And so they didn't have 4, so I didn't worry about it too much. I just run with 3. Next is the Sanctum of Ugin. So the Sanctum of Ugin strictly runs 4 of those. I actually swapped out one of those for the Eldrazi Temple, simply because Eldrazi Temple is a much better card. Eldrazi Temple is literally for Eldrazi, and I think the reason he didn't put it in the deck is because the deck was originally like designed to be under $100, but right now, as of right now, like 2019 August, the Eldrazi Temple is still running about $8 a piece. So if you were to get 4 of those, I mean, it's $30 plus dollars, and that's depending on, you know, which version, or if you get a brand new or whatever, right? So as opposed to the Sanctum of Ugin, which is 50 cents. So it's a cost thing. The only reason I have 1 Eldrazi Temple is because I got it in the Battle for Zendikar dual decks. Same reason I have a foil Oblivion Sower that looks different than the other one, because I got that in the dual deck. So because I got those in the dual decks, I have that. Next, I have -1 Magerig. So he runs 4, I run 3. Again, that's only because my local game store didn't have 4, so I just run 3 and just filled in. Next is the Spawning Bed. So Spawning Bed was the one that I was telling you about that gives you, let's see if I have it right here, Spawning Bed. So Spawning Bed is the land that I was telling you about that gives you can pay the 6 and tap it and sacrifice it to get the 3 Eldrazi tokens. I just never use that, so I think he runs 4 of those. I took out 2 and replaced it with creatures. So that's where the Endbringer and Endless one come in, just because I took out 2 land and replaced it with 2 creatures. But then I also changed how much other land I had. So I think he ran 27 land and I run 26, or he runs 26, I run 25. I'm like 1 less than him, just because, well, actually, I'll get into that. So next we move into the Ruins of Orn Reef. Again, it's really good. It's great that you can put the counters on there, but again, it comes in tapped, and sometimes that has actually screwed me over. So I do like the card, and I think it's worth it. That's why it's still in there. But the fact that it comes in tapped has kind of put me behind a couple games. So I do like it, but I kind of run less. I run 2 less because of that. Next is the Seagate Wreckage. Seagate Wreckage is this one right here. He runs 1 of these, I run 4. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, it doesn't come in tapped. 2, you get to add, you know, a colorless mana to your mana pool as opposed to a generic mana. And 3 is the ability that you can tap 3. You can pay 3 and then tap it and draw a card, and you can activate that if you have no cards in hand. So if you have 2 of these Seagate Wreckages on the field and you have 6 mana, you get to draw 2 cards. If you can do nothing else, well, I guess actually you could only do it once. So I'm sorry, but you can pay the 3 and tap it, draw the card. If you could use it, then you can do it again. But just being able to draw a card if you need to from that 1 ability is great, because you don't have to sacrifice this card to do it. So that's why I did it. Lastly is I have 1 Cryptic Caves. I just have the Cryptic Caves because it's another colorless land, and I haven't found something that I want to swap it out for at the moment. Right now it's kind of working, and I like it. I mean, it's not great, but it's okay. Doesn't come in tap, gives me a colorless mana. That's it. So the big reason for some of the changes in the land is just because two reasons. One, I kept getting tapped lands, so I couldn't use them that turn. This is why a lot of really expensive decks run like the shock lands, or they run the fetch lands, or whatever, because they want those lands to come in not tapped. So that was an issue that I was running into, as I kept pulling lands that had to come in tapped, so I couldn't even do anything that turn. And playing against fast decks, like a red deck, like my wife has a goblin deck, it would just do a lot of damage. Like by turn 3, and I just couldn't answer it. So that's why I kind of formatted some of that. Also, I kept running into the issue of having too much generic mana, and generic mana is great for paying generic costs, but when you have cards like Reality Smasher that needs a waste, a colorless mana, when they need the colorless mana, but you keep generating generic mana, that can kind of put you in a bad spot. So I kind of reduced some of the generic mana and ramped up the colorless mana so that I'd have those colorless to be able to play those colorless cards. So that's kind of why I changed some of the lands and what I did there. That's pretty much it for the changes on the deck. Again, what I have is it's almost the same deck, but there's a few changes like I already talked about. So now I just kind of wanted to talk about the deck in general. First off, I'll say the deck is not a fast deck per se, whereas like my red deck, my mono red, I could be doing damage turn 1. Lightning bolt, or suspending even rift bolt, putting out vexing devil, the get to lava runner, something like that, right? There's a lot of things that you can do turn 1 in that deck where you're already doing damage at the gate. Now I understand that that's kind of the point of red, but having a colorless deck like this, it's hard to answer stuff like that, even turn 2, So with this deck, you're not going to be doing really anything until about turn 3. So you turn 1, there's literally not a card in this deck you can play at turn 1 that's not land. So that's a downside. 2, by turn 2 you can play, you could play Spatial Contortion, you could play the Eldrazi Mimic, you could play the Hedron Crawler. So the Hedron Crawler is usually, if I have it, I'll try to play that first, because by turn 3 that'll give me 4 mana, because I'll generally start with 3 land. So I'll play 3 land, have that, tap it for 4, then I can start getting into those bigger cards like Matter Reshaper, or some of the higher cost cards, or like Hedron Archive to get 2 of those mana back, stuff like that. So the problem, that's a big kind of glaring issue, is that you can't really do anything until turn 3, 4, and then you can kind of start to pivot the game in your direction, like in your favor. So you have to be able to, you have to hope that your opponent doesn't kill you by like turn 4. And I know that's not generally going to happen, but it can. Like with my deck, my red deck, I could kill you by turn 4. Because I could do a lightning bolt turn 1, and then 2 lightning bolts turn 2, and then by turn 3, suspend 3 rift bolts. This is best case scenario, right? So that you've already taken 9, you're going to take another 9, and then I put out, Shaman of the Great Hunt or something, and you're dead. So that's my point. Again, that's best case scenario. Probably not going to happen or anything like that, because that was a lot of cards. But my point is that this deck it doesn't really do a whole lot till about turn 3, between 3 and 5. So in that range of turns 3 to 5, that's when you're going to start to be able to turn the game. So that's kind of an issue right there. But if you could survive till about turn 4, 5, you can start to pivot the game in your direction because of the mana ramp. So surprisingly, even though it's not a green deck, you do get mana ramp because of Hedron Archive and the Hedron Crawler, and then things like Eldrazi Temple. If I could, I would put in more Eldrazi Temples. If I wanted to spend the money, I would actually just swap out all of the Sanctum of Ugins for Eldrazi Temples so that I can get a 2 to cast Eldrazi spells. So that's probably something I would do. to give you that extra mana. So if you have Eldrazi temples, that would help out more if you had 4 of those as opposed to 4 Sanctum of Ugins. That would help, or even swapping out like the Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. It gives you the 2 mana, but you have to have 7 land. Doesn't help you early game, right? So, but the Eldrazi temple would help you throughout the whole game if you're playing Eldrazi spells, which most of these are. So that's my point there. So you do kind of start to ramp, and then you have cards to pull other cards out or reveal a card or things like that. So it starts to really kind of change the game at about turn 3 to 5. At that point, if you've survived and you have a decent amount of health left, you're not milled out, you know, if that's what your opponent's doing, then you can start to really change the game in your favor, because even if they start to block, you start getting into better cards that are pulling more cards out or allowing you to play cards easily, or you can, you know, use like the abilities from the lands to make it so you're you know, something can't block, or you can, you know, if you can get the I don't know where it went, but if you can get, oh here it is, if you can get the Beta Bala Ged out, the Beta Bala Ged, when you attack with it, they have to exile 2 permanents. So if you can get that out and start attacking with it, that's going to start chunking down all of their permanents. And even if they start getting rid of tokens, that's really less things for you to have to worry about. So overall, I would not say that the deck is overpowered, because it is highly counterable. It's not like it's got over the top things in it. I mean, it doesn't have like Emrakul. It doesn't have like, it doesn't even have like Ulamog or anything crazy like that. So it's not overpowered. I suppose you could swap out one of these cards for something really high cost like that, just, you know, if you wanted to try it. I did have Ulamog's Crusher in here for a while. I think that I had replaced that. I think that that's what I had before the Endless one, but I kept running into the issue of having not enough mana or land. So I took it out, kind of left it as is, and now the deck is pretty good. I like it quite a bit. Reducing the land a little bit, or at least by 1, for me has been beneficial, just because when I didn't, I kept running into the issue of drawing too much land. So cutting it down even 1 or 2 lands makes such a huge difference, because you really, I mean, in any given deck that's a mono, you could run 20 to 22 lands and probably be okay. So having 24 is probably a good number, but I think I even still have like 25 or 26. So I could probably cut down 1 more land and still be okay. If I were to do that, I would probably swap it out for another Endless one, because again, it's just a decent card to have just at any time. Now, I don't have a sideboard. I don't build sideboards just because I'm lazy and I don't want to keep investing more money in cards that we'll just keep swapping out. So generally, I just leave the deck, I build the deck, and then just play with it, hope for the best. So I don't have a sideboard, but if you look at the video that Strictly Better MTG did, he does have the sideboard for this deck, so you can take a look at it there. Pretty much overall, I do like the deck. I really do. I don't think it's overpowered. It's not like a green deck where you're ramping so much that you get to the point where all of your creatures have trample and they're all like 10/10s or ridiculous numbers. It's not anything like that, right? So I think that the deck is pretty balanced. You just can't do a whole lot first couple of turns, but once the game starts to progress, then it maintains a pretty solid flow, because a lot of the cards that you're putting out just kind of have some kind of effect that will aid you in some way, either with mana or drawing cards or getting rid of cards on the field. So it's a fun deck. I really like it, and I will continue to play with it against my wife and kids. But that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Again, I will link to Strictly Better MTG's videos so you can see the original. And I will put the deck list in the comment section or the description so that you can see the full deck list. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.